welcome to Fountainhead, brought to you by WebEngage. Fountainhead is a consolidation of all of our education, ecosystem, and community efforts. As the first initiative under this umbrella, the Fountainhead Leadership Series aims to bring to you the best of industry leaders to share actionable insights, tricks of the trade, and to answer all of your nuanced questions. So ready to get inspired and entertained? Let's go.
Good morning, everyone, at yet another session for the Fountainhead Leadership Series. Today, we have with us Revant Bhate. He's been an interesting guy in terms of the amount of stuff he's done for a long enough time. He's built a whole bunch of the Rebel Foods business while they were growing super aggressively. And then he branched out to set up his own company called Mosiac Wellness, where their more popular known brand is called Man Matters. And one of the things I've learned in conversations with him in the past is around being able to handle capital well. Because if you raise too much money too soon, you're also under the pressure to deploy that money very fast. And that what that translates into sometimes is not good consequences. So thank you, Revant, for doing this. And we welcome you on the podcast. And we would love to go deeper on your own journey as a first step and then get into more specific questions about money.
Thanks a lot, Ankur and team, for having me here today.
We'll just start with a bit of your journey just to make sure that it's
Sure. Yeah. So I think the genesis of why I've spent so much time in the ecosystem is a little bit beyond Rebel as well. In between, I also had stints in financial services. One was as an advisor before Rebel, where I used to help startups raise capital as an investment banker. And post Rebel, I had a stint for a couple of years as a early stage VC, where I learned what are the exciting startups beyond B2C as well that could create a lot of disruption in the country, right? And I think a little bit of how to, I really love this topic, right? Like, how do you do capital allocation? Right? By the way, this is something that comes up a lot, not just in startups, but even for funds, right? Whether it's a venture capital fund or private equity fund. And it's an interesting thing that nobody's taken this approach because we will always, let's call it capital starved in some way as a country. And the last 18 months have been all but anything but that, right? So it's a very interesting question that do we as founders, as business leaders today understand the concept of capital allocation? I don't know if you've done a good or bad job at it, but I think a lot of the learnings that we have had as a team, as an individual for me has been in the experiences that I've had, right? Like I've seen enough ups and downs with Rebel where we had the early GTM on the retail side, then the PMF to scale up was looking unclear. Then we pivoted to digital. 2015 came along. Everyone was flush with capital. I think as a marketeer in 2015 with Rebel, I had the worst capital allocation record ever of most marketeers. Luckily, it was not as bad that we ran into deep trouble, but we were 2016-17 when the funding winter came. Is when we realized that capital allocation is something that we should have done better, right? Or me as a marketer should have done a better job as in allocating the capital, looking at growth versus long-term sustaining business, right? And I think post the second pivot, obviously the business then obviously skyrocketed a lot more. We didn't need as much capital post there. I mean, of course, the last couple of years, the business has got a lot more capital, but that's because of high performance versus the business actually needing capital to grow as well. And I think even venture teaches you that, right? When there's, I think the power law actually exists even in businesses. Like for those who are not familiar with the power law, if you look at early stage venture, you may take 20 bets, just one or two of them may be home runs, and the rest will be either average returns or may not yield anything, right? Because it's a very risky asset class. So what ends up happening is you double down, triple down, and bet the house on something that is going to go deep, right? I don't think we follow that rule as well in startups as much because once you get a lot of capital, the initial interesting thing that even happened with us, like we raised the seed round even before the idea was fully fleshed out, right? And it was a decent amount of capital. You end up sort of throwing a lot of darts because you can, right? Because the team is excited to see what else can happen. Which is okay in the beginning, but you have to figure out a time to balance. How do you go deeper and really hit those home runs while continuing the innovation as well, right? And I think it's a very, very interesting topic, honestly. I don't know if you had chosen कि यार Revant से पूछेंगे सवाल, but I would love to sort of go deeper and understand, see where this conversation goes.
तो ये सोच के गया था कि रेवंत से ये सवाल पूछना और इसी पे डीप जाना है. That's perfectly a conscious choice made on that one. So maybe a simpler question. You've been at Rebel and then you were a major part of that whole story. And the whole journey from Rebel to being a VC and then to being a startup with seed money, which was not small money. From what I remember, this was substantial amount of money that you'd raised even before you actually had something.
Back then it looked substantial. Right? Today it looked peanuts.
Yes, of course. You're talking about still some time ago, right? So it was quite a interesting thing. Do you think that's an interesting playbook for somebody to follow? कि यार एक अच्छी कंपनी में काम करो, visibility रखो investors की, फिर बाद में या तो VC बनो या सीधा startup कर लो, but have money in the bank on day zero. That obviously reduces थोड़ा risk, if not fully.
So it looks in hindsight that wow, the trajectory looks very planned, but I don't think it panned out that way. Honestly, Rebel was a very conscious choice because I was honestly, sorry, I can't curse. I had to think of some other word than what I was going to use. But थोड़ा दिमाग खराब था कि यार advisory में तुम क्या ही कर रहे हो करके. And I really wanted real world experience. And Jaideep had this awesome program called Entrepreneurs in Residence, and phenomenal experience, right? Post that, a lot of it was just go with the flow, right? I mean, the venture opportunity came knocking because someone introduced me to Vani, and she was looking for someone to head K-Start, which was the seed fund. Right. And someone introduced and said, you should talk to this guy. And I really was excited to explore what the opportunities were, right? Even post-venture to start out, a lot of it, I actually blame on my co-founder who was shit bored after 6 years at McKinsey and 6 years in private equity. We've known each other for 15 years and like, kuch karte hain. I'm like, haan, we should. And, I mean, I keep getting 20 That's ideas a day. Yeah, right? Sure. So I sort of just went with the flow, and even the seed round just happened serendipitously, right? Like we were looking to raise a couple of million and just one thing led to other, right? So it's a playbook in hindsight that seems that it may work. I think what's a better playbook is to, whatever you do, just make sure you do it so well that anything you do next, right? You can become a VC, you can become an operator, you can become a podcast. I mean, if I look at Variku and what he's doing, you just build reputation basis something that you really are passionate about and you do well, right? I think that's the only playbook that people should follow. Because in the end, whatever happens, like I know everyone keeps saying compounding is the 8th wonder or 9th wonder of the world. It goes to money, it goes to learning. I think it goes for reputation as well, right? Like if you keep stacking up home runs, right? In whatever that is that you do up, you passionately karo, you do it with the right integrity and ethics. People then want to see you do well as well, right? They want to see you do multiple more things, right? And I think that's something that is what I've learned over a period of time with my experience, and that's the same advice I keep giving to other younger folks. That yeah, kuch bhi karo. Like I was on this panel recently where I really loved what Amod said. I think it was for a movie. कि भले घास काटने वाला बनो, but अच्छे से घास काटो, right? People will take notice. There is someone who will say that यार बहुत बढ़िया घास काटती है, चलो अब ये भी try करते हैं, right? That's all there is to do. And I remember talking to my co-founder about it. Like I didn't get through McKinsey, तो मैं तो ego पे ले लेता हूँ कि यार मतलब ऐसा क्या है मेरे में कि McKinsey में नहीं, right? But here's an interesting point that when the evaluation happens, right? I work purely on passion. Like मुझे अच्छा लग रहा तो मैं करूँगा, नहीं अच्छा तो नहीं करूँगा. Whereas what someone like McKinsey looks at is कि like I asked them, why do you look at grades so much? Right? क्या है तुमको top 10 ranker चाहिए? They're like, you may hate studying, but you still did it, right? So some of that grit and resilience is something that they love, right? Because it's a hard job consulting, right? Yep. 16 घंटे you're doing advisory, traveling here and there. Thinking, abhi travel thoda 18 महीने से बंद होगा, but it's not so much fun, right? So can you do the hard work even when it's not fun, right? Which is fine. I said, okay, then I can't. So it's I'm not a fit, right? But it's a valid thing for them, right? It works for them because they need that, right? So I think the world will evolve. I think everybody who has that thesis is sort of also reinventing the wheel now, because they're seeing today's youth and saying that यार Twitter पे इतना ज्ञान मिल रहा है कि passion follow करो तो सब लोग creator बन जाएंगे तो consulting कौन करेगा? So let's see how it evolves over the next 10-20 years. But as an individual, you should always do what you're passionate about, right? And do it well.
I think the word I'm going to take out of this is reputation compounds, which is the only playbook you probably are recommending out of all the things that you've seen or done.
I think so, right? Because in the end, yeah, I think and sometimes you'll fail. And that's why I keep encouraging people who are entrepreneurs to not get so caught up in failure as well, right? It's okay. As long as you put your best foot forward, you tried hard, and it has to be acknowledged, right? In the end, that it's not an easy thing to do. So, for example, like we keep discussing, like even at our stage, though we are well back, we have a few angel investors. I would, without fail, every quarter send an update, right? I don't need to. They're like, yeah, tu update bhej rahe, we don't need it, right? But I'm like, no, that's the basic minimum, yeah. Bhale tumne chote paise lagaye hain, but you're still a shareholder, right? I want to make sure that we have basic standards of governance, right? So, and I know a lot of folks who would be like, कि ठीक है यार, मतलब angel investor है, क्यों update देना है करके, right? It's a way of how people work. I am not saying that you would be considered, hey, this is not a good person because he's not doing that. But all of these things do matter in the end, right? Like people want to just see that there is basic courtesy, basic professionalism. Then are you doing anything above and beyond? There's just so many layers to it as well, right? It's very hard to plan these things. You have to just figure out your DNA, look at, and I think that's where when you're passionate about something, all of these things just follow through. I don't think any one of us are at heart overly givers or overly takers. Like, give and take, there was always this, right? Hey, are you a taker or are you a giver, right? I think it's a lot about the situation that you're in, and and it's not about money, right? It's not like just because you have a lot of money that you can give. Anyway, the most valuable commodity that all of us is time, and wo to sabke paas same hai, right? So how you are able to allocate time and whether you are a giver or a taker is something that also is and I think you automatically become a giver when you're passionate about something because you enjoy those conversations.
Sure.
Right? And I think that's where a lot of these do what you're passionate about really helps, right? And these are the smaller things that if you start double clicking, you will see that everything then fits much more easier.
And I can very simply tie this back to that reputation compounding thing, right? Because the venture has its own share of, let's say, risk involved, but the reputation that you make with your investors or even your angels will still carry forward. Venture may or may not translate into something massive, but the reputation is what you would want to protect and make sure that remains, let's say, on a growth track.
Hard to measure, and I just to be very, very clear, I am never recommending that you make that a North Star, because once you start doing that, then you will get overtly worried about it. Like, for example, there could be a few things that may not be right for me as an individual and my reputation, but is right for the company, right? So how do you then take that call?
So again, वाला part है, जो पसंद नहीं वाला part काम करने वैसा?
हाँ, तो होता है यार कभी ना कभी. See, in the end, for example, we have a very clear decision-making framework in the company, right? Which is company comes first, then your team, and then yourself, right? That framework. So if I have to follow that, then sometimes I'll have to take to the hard call, right? Sometimes for something is happening with a company, and let's say one of my friends who was also, I've known the guy, he's working with us, but his company and my company, they're at loggerheads or something. Company comes first. I don't care about my reputation with the guy or whether he feels bad or not, right? So I'm not saying that you run your decision-making framework on reputation. Nor do you ever keep it your North Star. I just think it's an outcome that happens unconsciously if you keep doing the right thing over the 20, 30 years, right? And maybe that's what compounds.
Fair enough. So, well, I think a bit of that reputation is what came into play when the serendipitous round of funding that happened, right? So if you could just go deeper into that transition from where the venture capital case start play was happening to the time you decided to run the startup, you found a co-founder from the McKinsey, from what I heard from you. Let's just go maybe a few steps deeper into that element.
Yeah. So, I mean, see, honestly, it's we were just keen to create something on the health and wellness side. Both of us were getting older, so we are same age here now, 38, I think, or 37. Yeah. So midlife crisis nahi ho rahi thi, but we were getting close to that, right? And we knew that these are problems that are not spoken about enough, but still need to be addressed, right? And we thought, yeah, interesting market hai. I think there was a broad thesis that at least was forming in the head that healthcare was the last place that was done more in a B2B fashion versus a B2C fashion, and therefore we thought that consumerization of healthcare is something that will evolve. Now this was pre-COVID, right? Post-COVID, तो obviously थोड़ा एक inflection सा आ गया उसमें. But pre-COVID, when we looked at elective health and wellness, we said, yeah, this is where consumerization of healthcare will happen, where the choice will be with the consumer versus, something that like a pharma company, for example, is a B2B company. They sell to doctors then write the products, right? Same happens with every healthcare business. And we said the power will move to the hands of the consumer because as distribution is now democratized, they will start slowly realizing that elective health means choice मेरे पास है. देखो अगर आपको diabetes है तो और let's say you have an acute or a chronic issue, you will end up with the best doctor in your neighborhood and you'll say, boss, मेरे को problem solve कर. But elective health, for example, could be that, yeah, I can ignore this, right? It's okay. It's not the most troubling thing today in the world, right? Let's take our weight as like I could argue that I'm a little underweight, but I'm like, chalo, theek hai yaar, matlab long term karenge, but nothing to really address. It's my choice where I spend my time. There, largely, if you have to make people more aware, you have to make people understand that, how they could actually look at a very convenient solution. So the power is in the hand of consumers. And that's why we thought that a branded approach would be very interesting to take. There was some experience in building brands, albeit in food.
Of course.
Everybody had the same question that, ठीक है यार, मतलब idea तो अच्छा है, but food में brand बनाना और healthcare में बनाना बहुत अलग चीज है. Of course अलग चीज है. मैं कौन सा मना कर रहा हूँ? But at least idea तो interesting है करके, right? And I think luckily for us, people even pre-COVID felt that there is an interesting idea. And see, honestly, a seed check is always something like, yeah, let's roll the dice and see, right? Because in the end, the make or break is always GTM. And we talk a little bit of the capital allocation. For us, we may have raised the 10 million seed, but for the next 18 months, we didn't even spend half of it.
That's exactly what I was going to get to, because you're very conscious of not being under pressure to deploy this capital. Because like you said, you're so tempted to throw all those darts as you can, just because you can. And now, given the way the ecosystem is and you've been as much touch with investors, there's also some degree of question mark on, how fast can you deploy capital? It's almost like it's a metric of your capability if you're not able to deploy capital quickly enough. Or quickly, that's where we'll just go all level of depth on this one.
So I don't think people are asking the question of how fast can you deploy capital. The question being asked is that if capital is being available to you, can you grow faster? Can you accelerate some of your initiatives and get PMF on them early? Or there is always the situation of build versus buy, right? So that's the third option that comes into play. Now, I think all three are very, very valid options to grow, but only if you have a profitable, scalable PMF, right? So the journey of any business is go-to-market strategy, early PMF, stable PMF, scalable PMF, profitable, scalable PMF. Now, all of this just seems
like this is the common theme. मतलब बाकी जनता इस तरह से सोच रही है, आप सोच रहे हो?
सोचना पड़ेगा in the exactly. We are also evolving, right? 5 साल पहले मुझे भी पता नहीं था यार कि मतलब अच्छा go to market strategy बोलते हैं करके. Right? अभी तो Twitter is helping everybody. Don't worry. So,
और hopefully this conversation will. चलो तो हम वापस आते हैं वहाँ पे.
लेकिन अभी कैसे product manager और पहले प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर डायरेक्टर प्रोडक्ट था, आप तो एपीएम सीनियर पीएम ऐसे 4 वो हो गए, तो थोड़ा सा ब्रेकअप करना. इट्स एन इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग, राइट? फॉर एग्जांपल अर्ली पीएमएफ इज कि यार आपका जीटीएम काम कर रहा है, एक जीटीएम काम कर रहा है और आपने फिगर आउट कर लिया. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल इन आवर केस वी स्टार्टेड विद मेंस हेल्थ. इन मेंस हेल्थ वी अंडरस्टूड दैट थिंग्स आर टैबू एंड men struggle to open up, so we should create a platform where men can feel comfortable talking, not be judged, right? And the discovery was that 2 big issues are, let's say, hair loss and sexual health, right? Sexual health has its own challenges. Now, GTM is not कि आपने ये discover किया, नहीं, ये तो insight है आपकी. GTM is आपने, with this insight, how did you go to market and make sure that customers came to you and said that हाँ तुम जो बोल रहे हो हम आपके साथ solve करेंगे.
बिल्कुल.
Right? फिर उसके बाद इकोनॉमिक्स आएगी जिसमें पीएमएफ का डेफिनेशन और कॉम्प्लिकेट होगा. बट अब जीटीएम देखते हैं, राइट? जीटीएम में आप क्या करोगे? अगर आप B2C बिजनेस बना रहे हो तो या तो आप पुश करोगे या तो आप पुल करोगे, राइट? यू विल प्रेजेंट योरसेल्फ वेयर पीपल आर लुकिंग फॉर यू. Let's say Amazon bottom of the funnel search volume for ashwagandha tablets, right? Which is for stress, sleep. Some of them used for sexual health also, right? Can you put a product there, bid on that keyword? That's a pull strategy, right? Okay. Pushes, I will go on Facebook, influencers, multiple ways that you would go and create awareness there, right? Now, each channel is a GTM. I think the biggest realization that has come in the last 18 months with the 20 things everybody is doing, हर चैनल एक का जीटीएम और हर चैनल में जीटीएम में अलग प्रॉब्लम्स आती है और अलग सॉल्यूशन देना पड़ेगा, राइट? लाइक फेसबुक एज अ जीटीएम यूज्ड टू वर्क ग्रेट 4 years back. Now with the privacy concerns, the targeting that's available on Facebook has become quite broad. It's not as narrow as it used to be before, right? Very hard to now do GTM on Facebook for specific things. I think a lot of businesses will still get it, but that is coming down gradually. 3 years back, as an alternative, influencers started coming. That peaked during COVID. I think वो भी थोड़ा over competitive हो गया, right? So ऐसे अलग-अलग GTMs आते रहेंगे, right? And we have to keep discovering. And what will happen is your proposition may not work the same across. Like for example, Facebook as a GTM and Instagram as a GTM are totally different. Audiences ही अलग बैठी है ना. Their behaviors are different. Like for example, the big basket customer and the Amazon customer is completely different. So let's call them channels for lack of a better, right? So each of them is a channel.
Or maybe funnels.
Your go-to market strategy for each of them has to be different. And if you find one thing that is common across, so for let's take a product business, which is आपके पास 10 product है, एक product जो है वो हर जगह पे आग लगा रहा है GTM में. That is where you go deep, right? This is where power law use करो और आग लगा दो उसमें और दिमाग मत लगाओ, right? But can you do GTM parallelly across 5 channels? That's very hard. Because to find an expert who can do, Facebook, Instagram, influencer, एक बंदा कैसे करेगा, right? Then you need experts for that. Then you need that discovery process. That time, how do you short circuit, right? So this is the problem with a B2C business. B2B businesses, therefore, are far more easier. But आप जैसे for your business, for example, you would have enterprise का अलग GTM होगा आपका. Correct. Startup ecosystem का आपका अलग go-to-market strategy होगा, right? And you can't have the same team doing that. SaaS businesses also have to say that, yeah, here we have to be nimble and give more DIY solutions. Here I need to meet and have drinks 3 times to make sure that they even understand.
Good deal. To at least start talking to me or pay attention to me.
Or you need someone who's either gray hair or half balding as Ankur की senior बंदा है, मतलब बच्चे नहीं आगे 24 साल के. Because today's biggest struggle I see from 24-year-old great founders in SaaS is like, yeah, seriously नहीं लेता सामने वाला करके. We need a guy who can at least talk to a 40-year-old and also. So these are all, and they just take time, right? So do one GTM or one channel, focus, crack. वो हो गया, फिर दूसरा करो, right? So what happens is if you take too much capital, you cannot short circuit this time unless you have someone as a lead who can context switch and have good people there. So that's what we tried, right? What we do with capital, instead of doing one channel, one proposition, I took, okay, let's try 5 channels together. I don't know if with एक common layer मिलेगा कि नहीं, but because I can context switch and understand, and I had to figure out what are the right folks to put in these positions and then quickly do that. Luckily, we found in the first 6 months one thing that could traverse all GTMs, and then we just went deep there, right? Then the next platform came in because I said, okay, if you're doing men's health and we understood how to do it, then let's think of women's health as well, right? Much harder GTM, completely different consumer segment, right? Your channels may be the same, but the behavior is different. So now if I can I take a lot more money today? Yes. But what will I do with it? Because every channel GTM proposition needs a certain time to get to scalable PMF. And then you sort of push money there, right? I think accelerating that is not that easy. So the best businesses that are actually raising capital for the right reasons have a super scalable product which traverses across different channels, and therefore go-to-market strategies are not different, and has massive TAM. right? So I think these nuances are not looked at when people say कि अरे उसने 100 million raise कर लिया, ऐसा क्या कर रहा है वो? अरे उसके business में scalable PMF आ गया ना, तो क्यों नहीं उसे raise करेगा उसको? तो आपको वो सवाल पूछना है. And today investors may give you a lot of money for early PMF also because the market is like that's what the see bull and bear markets में difference ये है कि bear markets में आप scalable PMF पे हो तो लोग बोलेंगे scalable profitable PMF कहाँ है, right? Bull markets में है कि early PMF है, हाँ यार टीम अच्छी लग रही है तो let's maybe take a right, like early PMF is good, market is good, team is exciting. It's a risky bet, but people will take it, right, in bull market. So we should not mistake a bull market and their exuberance or excitement with saying ki I have scalable PMF. I think that's the only nuanced difference to make, right? Ki yaar, you should know in your heart, भले publicly मत बोलो आप, but अंदर अपने आप से honest रहो कि आप early PMF है, stable है, scalable profitable है कि नहीं, और उसके हिसाब से पैसे खर्चो.
तो आपने जो 6 stages बोली, that would be a normal organic discovery curve, right? From the part that you were trying your early GTM to your early PMF to the scalable PMF and then scalable profitable PMF.
So just to give you
steps, but yeah.
Like what is the difference between early and stable for some? Just to give you an idea, right? कि early PMF में आपका GTM क्रैक हो गया, आपको समझ में आएगा कस्टमर को अंदर कैसे लाना है.
डिमांड जनरेटर ने कर ली कि आपके पास इनफ
स्टेबल में ये है कि
कैक नहीं देखा आपने, अभी कैक देखा या नहीं देखा?
नहीं, ऑब्वियस कैक हैज टू मेक सेंस, अदरवाइज हाउ कैन यू डिफाइन प्रोडक्ट मार्केट फिट? नो, कैक हैज टू मेक सेंस.
सो चलो एक बार शुरू से चलता है. आपने जब कैटेगरी बनाने की बात करी, then you're talking about that okay, you're in a crowded market or maybe in a new market and you're trying to create a certain category and a certain level of demand for it. So there'll be a funnel, you will do some advertising across whatever channels you're doing, and there'll be a funnel that will come into consuming your product. And इस stage पे you would call it, अगर CAC control में चल रही है and you're able to acquire enough customers, then would you call it an early GTM success?
Yeah.
Okay. And now what happens next from here?
Second is customers have to retain, right? Consumer business सबसे बड़ा problem तो वही है.
Exactly.
जैसे SaaS में आपके लिए तो I envy a lot of
साल भर में एक बार पता चलता है, but ठीक है, आपको तो ये होता है, बदल जाएगा.
Yeah. हफ्ते बाद नहीं, but yeah, महीने 45 days में you'll get to know, right? That's where you need to have enough propositions, or your core proposition should be strong enough that your retention is good. And if your retention is good, you know that you can keep chugging along and make sure that this becomes a viable business, right? So stable PMF is मतलब forget money being there, not being there. आपका business में at least ये है sense कि ये चलता रहेगा, right? You can keep growing, let's say 10% month on month, and you don't need a lot of capital to grow there because retention then starts kicking in.
Compounding.
It's like this, right? And every business operates this way. For example, if you go back 20 years when digital did not exist, offline stores भी होता था ना. DMart अगर 10 स्टोर डालेगा तो वो देखेगा 10 स्टोर पैसा फेंक रहा है तो मैं और 10 स्टोर डालूंगा, मतलब मैं और, right? You have to keep doing this, right? And that's where you have some stable PMF. Now, I think at least, and that's how I look at it. Maybe there are different definitions, and any VCs who are hearing this who may disagree, please don't mind that if I am.
That's okay.
But I think we should be happy even if we get to that basic stage, right? Scalable में फिर थोड़ा सा time question आ जाता है, क्योंकि end में क्या होता है ना, there is diminishing utility of every marketing dollar that you will keep spending, right? Sure. So you need to make sure that your proposition is strong enough.
Are you able to indicate, link these with some sort of a numeric scale कि यार यहाँ तक पहुँचने में इतना खर्चा और इतना revenue, यहाँ तक पहुँचने में इतना
depends on proposition, no?
Sure.
All depends on proposition.
मतलब
but roughly I would say for every dollar that you raise, or every dollar that, forget raise, what you spend. Ideally, rule of thumb is, can you get to about 3 times that annualized revenue? At least I would take that for
मतलब आप साल भर का lifetime value समझ लो, क्या का lifetime value का रिश्ता?
नहीं, आप सिर्फ marketing dollars सोच रहे हो. I'm saying that let's say you're a B2C business. You've raised, let's say $10 million, right?
ठीक है.
Let's say you put 5 million. Are you getting to at least a $10 to $15 million annualized revenue with that? Is what I would actually honestly.
That's a healthy business if it is getting there. So 5 mil खर्च करके at a company burn level 15 mil का annual revenue पहुंचाना है.
That's a very good case. 10 mil is also
okay. हाँ, 10 कोई बुरा नहीं है, but मतलब 10 से नीचे हो तो फिर कुछ सोचने का समय है.
Then you'll start looking and say कि आपके early PMF भी है कि नहीं करके. See, these are there are inputs and there are outputs, right? I think the easiest starting point becomes that कि यार अगर आप capital efficient नहीं हो, then you start first going and saying कि यार unit economics देखते हैं ना करके, कहाँ do you actually have PMF or not? Because आजकल इंडिया में है ना एक प्रॉब्लम है कि हर चीज में थोड़ी डेप्थ तो आ जाती है. Like there was a time when, for example, fashion companies, when they used to hit 1-2 crores, people say, "अरे बहुत बढ़िया, this is a nice 10-12 crore in a year business, so this can scale." Today, 100 crore पे भी people don't necessarily move because they're like, यार इतना डेप्थ आ गया है मार्केट में ऑनलाइन शॉपिंग के लिए that it's hard to determine whether you have real PMF or not, right? Lot of it could be just early, and fashion में you don't get repeat very quickly, right? And high order values. Electronics ले लो आप, right? ढाई अभी ये जो मैं ये पहन रहा हूँ, like 3,000, 4,000. You don't need a lot of customers to get to a, let's say, 2-3 crore a month kind of size, right? So you need to then look a little deeper and see that where is the gap existing, right? But I think even with stable PMF, if you have repeats, I think one thing we missed is obviously basic economics. In stable PMF, you also need to make sure that ऐसा नहीं है कि repeat इसलिए नहीं आ रहा है क्योंकि आपका gross margin 40% ही है, right? So a lot of people, for example, use that as a strategy. So in stable PMF, I also would make sure that you are at contribution zero है, मतलब ऐसा नहीं है कि आप contribution पे burn कर रहे हो करके. Because then you would still not have PMF. Of course, I know a lot of businesses that use negative gross margins as a go-to-market strategy. Right? That's a different thing. That is completely different. We should not equate two different kind of businesses. Right? Like for example, I could be an offline POS provider who is saying that I will not charge you for UPI, credit card, debit card, कोई MDR नहीं. Because that is my go-to-market strategy. मैं सब कुछ free कर दूंगा, but I'll do lending on top and then make my money there.
Sure.
It's a perfectly acceptable strategy.
Sure, but it's a different business model.
हाँ, so I'm just saying let's not equate.
मतलब वो CAC का equivalent हो गया उसकी केस में, but ठीक है.
Exactly. फिर हाँ, उसको आप वहाँ CAC देखते हो. That's the right way to see it. Then you look at that as CAC, what you are losing out and giving for free, और अपने जेब से दे रहे हो, and then see how you can recover that, right? And businesses with pure network effects, it's okay to be gross margin negative also, right? So, but there are just very few pure network effect businesses I have seen, unfortunately, in the country, right? Where people are just here. Now that we are on this network, the switching cost out of this network is so high that it's okay if they raise the rates, I'll still not go out of it. Because, and very few businesses like that exist, but they do.
Yeah, probably apart from Zio, I don't know of any.
No, I mean, so I could argue that something like Razorpay, for example, may not have phenomenal network effects on the value of the network, but for example, their product features and their ability to give such a great product experience is because of the network that they built up, right? So, of course, it's not like they were. So there is
maturity.
The flywheels are very different.
Yeah.
Flywheels are very different.
I was going to compare this to an ideal network effect scenario would be somebody like a Paytm, but it's not remained a sustained play कि भाई कोई और कुछ कर नहीं पाया. There is a constant market share grab happening there, right?
Yeah, WhatsApp is a great network effects business.
That's a great network effect story.
Amazon has fabulous network effects in the flywheel that they have created.
मतलब demand supply side पे बोल रहे हो?
Yeah, any product seller today.
Yeah, both supply side, demand side, they can't not be on Amazon. Fair.
So, I mean, you have to really identify, and you should get stakeholders to identify that हाँ ये बन सकता है, तो चलो let's keep the gross margin negative because like there's this brilliant business that's being built out today, right? Called GoQuick, which is saying that everybody is suffering returns and RTO because all of you are getting bad. Like Sybil, by the way, Sybil was the original network effect, right?
Yep, sure.
They went to every bank and said, give me your NPA data. I will not share the customers, but I will tell every bank should know who's a bad customer, right? And that's the original network. I mean, of course, they didn't go the venture way, but you could build 5 Sybils for 5 different. So, like GoQuick is building the Sybil for e-commerce. You could build something like that for offline lending. Like NBFC lending doesn't have a Sybil equivalent, right? Because they do new to credit lending, and there is no. Sybil doesn't know who's below 750 ना, या जिसने आज तक credit लिया ही नहीं हो, Sybil का data कहाँ है? So is there a Sybil equivalent for new to credit? And India is credit starved, right? So there are just so many ways.
Possibilities.
Just simple replication of a Sybil model to 5 different business areas could give you great network effect business. और उसमें आपको कोई problem नहीं है if you're negative gross
negative.
margin for the first 2 years.
For the बोलते हैं ना mortals who will have to deal with gross margin level kind of businesses जहाँ पे network
हाँ,
effect
that
का
we
कोई
can.
नहीं आएगा वहाँ
Yeah.
पे अगर zoom in करके बात करें, so in your early PMF you said it's bad idea to go gross margin negative for sure, but with contribution margin you're supposed to be zero if you were to call it a PMF at least.
हाँ, early में थोड़ा it's okay.
At least fulfillment level तक
stable
नहीं जाना चाहिए ना negative.
हाँ, fulfillment के बाद and even post marketing, I think stable PMF define करने के लिए तो you have to be CM0. Otherwise, then something is still breaking, right? Or you have visibility to CM0 if your repeat base goes up, because then you'll always have cold start problems on your repeat base. So if you can show that after a year my repeat base goes to this because of this retention sustains, like every cohort keeps coming back more and we'll get to CM0, that's also okay. But having a sense of that is very, very critical, right? Same would be for like how we define payback periods. That's another way to look at it. Like I'm sure in your business,
value वाला होगा.
हाँ, but थोड़ा complex हो जाता है. I think looking at a simple P&L that everyone does every month is also the most helpful thing as such.
हाँ, मतलब so the part that we are constantly intrigued about, right? The early stage founders, D2C founders with let's say $500,000, $1 million raised in money, वो अगर बहुत systematically approach करेंगे तो जितनी mortality होती है शायद ना होती. Because from seed to series A level itself, you will see so much of mortality. If they were consciously approaching this PMF कि भाई जब तक एक शेयर नहीं होता तब तक 3 शेयर मत जाओ, जब तक तुम्हारा एक प्रोडक्ट प्रॉपर्ली सक्सेसफुल होकर ठीक ठाक PMF पे नहीं है तब तक VC कैटलॉग मत बनाओ. That's the kind of mistakes you see people making, right? So and you've been an angel investor as well. So I'm just now trying to kind of connect those dots that from all the people that you talk to and pitches that you hear, do you think this is commonly understood, the whole journey that you're speaking about this?
I think it's understood. It's very hard to stay the course, यार. मतलब मैं खुद कितना distract होता हूँ. Like you know, one day I'll say that, hey guys, let's focus. 2 हफ्ते बाद मैं यार ये idea है. फिर मेरे को पहले तो टीम बोलती थी, आजकल बोल देती है कि रेवंत आप decide कर लो. ठीक है, आप कभी it's very hard, yeah. So I empathize with every founder who goes through this. I myself go through this. It's
but आपका partner McKinsey से है ना, तो उसको तो आदत है discipline की थोड़ी सी better at least, नहीं?
हाँ, तो हमेशा सुनता नहीं हूँ उसकी मैं. तो but yeah, he's the but yeah, he's the rational guy who's like you know, and I'm getting better at it, obviously. But you need a lot of feedback mechanism for this, right? And I think, again, I've been very privileged to have that feedback mechanism from the board, from my co-founder, from a great team who's very open about questioning these things, and
but also
a bunch of fabulous angels, right?
Your personality as well to be receptive. बाकी कई सारे लोग तो आजकल वो Steve Jobs mode में रहते हैं ना, they don't want to listen back.
I'm more receptive in these kind of conversations. ऐसा नहीं है कि I'm not aggressive or sometimes downright कि यार my way यही करना है करके.
Democracy नहीं चला रहे वो तो सबको पता है. That's okay, you know.
But you have to learn to have the balance. I think the first 1 year was very hard because I was more, this is what we should do. Now I'm learning कि नहीं यार, मतलब I can also go wrong and okay, let's thrash it out. But again, I think even as leaders, मैं भी पहली बार CEO बन रहा हूँ यार, मैं भी सीख रहा हूँ. तो honestly, थोड़ा tweak करते रहना पड़ेगा. But it's just hard in an entrepreneurial journey. I think the best thing that helps is to have a solid sounding board. Like you may have co-founders, that's fine, but I use 3 or 4 of my angels a lot for this. Like every month I'll catch up and say this problem statement. And a lot of times they'll say you're thinking right. But even that sort of just, because yeah, self-doubt to bahut aata hai. As a founder, तो I'm sure every founder goes through this almost every week. यार क्या कर रहे हैं, सही कर रहे हैं कि नहीं करके.
Sure, fair enough. इसके लिए मैं आपका वो framework समझना चाहता था. Since you talked about the whole framework for capital allocation, you spoke about the stages of this whole thing. कि यार अभी इस stage पे पैसा allocate करना तो कहाँ करना है, कैसे करना है? Because a lot of people when they raise that kind of money when you did at seed would probably have a fancy office, probably offer double salaries, offer BMWs to product managers for all I care, and a whole bunch of jazz. So how did you go about deploying your capital? Or at least what is the framework you recommend people use when thinking about capital deployment?
Yeah, so honestly, team building to becomes a little easy if you have operated. And like for me, my first 5 folks were people who I had worked with before, right? So that's always easy. And I always encourage people that, yeah, theek hai, even if you're a fresher, go and sell to your college, rock stars who you really think would add great value and sell to them and get them on board, right? Because your first 20, 25 people has to be from your network, right? Otherwise, it will be a little I mean, you may get rock stars nevertheless, but it's going to be very hard. It's a needle in the haystack. Why would they join you, etc. Right? So seed stage is the toughest to get the team on board. Again, very privileged that a bunch of folks who had worked with me decided to jump in and say, "Okay, we trust you. Let's figure it out." Right? And honestly, over the last 2 years, I think they would have thought 2-3 बार कि यार क्या कर लिया करके हमने, but I'm very thankful that they stayed and helped build the first 18-20
But इसमें capital का role था या बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं था?
नहीं यार, luckily that's why I'm saying ना, if they trust you ना, then they'll look at an equity heavy
compensation
well, right? And and you need that in the beginning. Like I can never, like now we are a little, let's say Series A plus. Not everybody will scale to how to think at Series B or becoming a leader. They may remain at the same position. They may get a supervisor on top, which is all fine, right? But I can never thank or acknowledge them enough that they पहले 18 महीने जो लोग आए ना, मतलब बचा लिया, मतलब उन्होंने की so you should always really appreciate.
But that's a fun fact, right? This is not to do with capital. This is to do with how you brought this team together. Probably the personal network that you brought in, and they came in with conviction for you more than the conviction for anything else.
Starting में है, you have to have the ability to have people back the founders. कि यार ये founders जो है ना, मतलब
ठीक ही है,
भले fail होंगे तो भी हाँ enjoy करेंगे, learn
हमको मजा आएगा, सीखने को मिलेगा.
हाँ, और future will not be that bad, right? Even if we fail, right? So I think that's very critical. Don't try to post Series A. I think at the scalable, when you hit the stable PMF, I would say forget scalable. If you want to get to scalable PMF, I think then that's the time to really introspect, sit down and say, ki yaar, if this is my scalable PMF playbook, okay, these are the 4 functional experts I need. Do I have them in the org or not? And if I don't, have a very honest chat with the current org and say, we need this guy, let's get this guy. Then go out, because you will, in my view, I think stable to scalable PMF is very hard. Unless you get, it's almost like 0 to 1 ho gaya, 1 to 10 karna hai.
Correct.
Right? May not be the same team that you had in the 0 to 1 stage, right? And there you will need to, of course, you would have, because you would have maybe reached Series A, some more reputation, some lesser risk. That ठीक है यार, मतलब कुछ ढंग का कर रहे हैं, मतलब ऐसा नहीं कि हाँ कुछ तो हो रहा है, ऐसा नहीं कि किसी ने बस पैसा रेस कर लिया, पता नहीं क्या ही करने वाला है, right? And you would have more ability to get referenced also, right? Like you talk to 5 people in the team, they'll tell you that this is the good thing about Revant, this is the bad thing, and this is the worst thing, right? Now you are making a more informed choice, for example, on whether to join that org or not. Ability to pay a little market comp post Series A becomes a little easier. Then that's when you go for talent. B pay, you do that even more. C pay, you do that even more.
Sure.
That's my opinion. But maybe we can talk again in a year and a half once hopefully we reach B, and maybe my mind will change there.
मतलब आप मान के चल रहे हो कि 1.5 में B पहुंचना है, उससे पहले मतलब कुछ जल्दबाजी नहीं है. You're not raising a B in the next 6 months or something.
Never say never, but I'm just roughly taking a 2-year period between rounds.
I go back to the whole allocation question, because you said in the initial part that you did not use till almost 18 months a big part of your seed money. And that's where I was curious at the framework in which how to deploy capital. So you did not over deploy on the talent side of things, as I understood in your initial pitch. So where did you deploy this capital, or what would you suggest founders do when they have a certain amount of money in their bank with, let's say, a seed capital infused? What is the right way to allocate? कि यार क्या करें क्या नहीं करें? मतलब immediately एक CTO
do everything possible to get to early PMF first, right? So that's what we did for the first 9 months. To early PMF पहुंच गए. Next 9 months we did everything possible to get to stable PMF. That doesn't
work very well. That is not going to change. But इसके लिए capital, मतलब so when you say early PMF, तो उसमें तो बहुत सारा judgment call आता है ना कि यार ये 4 चीजें चाहिए या नहीं चाहिए. When you say early PMF, आपने बोला CM 0 तक पहुंच जाना चाहिए, तो मैं एटलीस्ट एक लेवल पे कि तुम्हारा कस्टमर एक्विजिशन कॉस्ट तुम्हारे कंट्रोल में चल रहा है, right? Now in order for that to happen, you will have to invest in a bunch of things, whatever, people level पे और performance level पे, brand level पे, category level पे, whatever.
नहीं, I think आपके consumer insight जो है for a B2C business. See, for example, Gautam, if you let's say you raise the $5 million for building exactly what WebEngage is doing, right? आपने बोला कि मेरे को marketing automation, I want to help CMOs in this country and globally, right? And you first सबसे पहले product बनाओगे ना.
Sure.
What will you invest in? You will invest in getting 3 solid clients who will say that आप बनाओ, अगर आपने जो आप बोल रहे हो ना बना पाओगे, अगर बना दिया तो I will be your client, right?
Sure.
तो आप फीडबैक लेते लेते प्रोडक्ट बनाओगे, फिर वो 3 क्लाइंट के वहां डिप्लॉय करोगे, फिर आप बोलोगे आप खुश हो के नहीं, बोले नहीं यार मेरे को ये 4 तकलीफ है, तो आप till you keep those 3 customers happy and you can get a check from them for money, right? कि हाँ you pay me $100,000 a year, you don't need a big team for that, right? Because that is the only thing you have to do for early PMF.
Yeah, so
कंज्यूमर पे करते हैं, राइट? सो कंज्यूमर पे भी सेम, अगर आपने मार्केट गलत चूज किया, आपकी इनसाइट गलत थी, आपने प्रोडक्ट गलत लॉन्च किया, there's no point, just go back to the drawing board and fix it. मतलब no amount of
marketing
is going to help. और ये
किस स्टेज पे आप बोलोगे कि ये पता चल गया कि तुमने मार्केट गलत चूज किया है, फिर प्रोडक्ट गलत चूज किया है, फिर मतलब whatever, how do you decide?
You'll get to know in a month, यार, मतलब yeah, मतलब see either the leading signals. So I'll tell you, it's reverse, right? Let's take a very simple thing. If you're a product business, okay, let's say I'm selling this mouse, okay?
Okay.
Now इस mouse में क्या है? I can price decide करना है मेरे को. Proposition क्या है कि ये mouse क्यों मुझे लोगों को अच्छा लगेगा? And whether they'll buy it at the right CAC or not, right? If I am not even doing the right research or understanding what is it that people are looking for in a mouse, simple enough, no, go to Amazon, see what are the top 3 selling mouses, right? उनके features क्या है, वो तो bare minimum करना पड़ेगा, point of parity, forget point of differentiation. उसके ऊपर let me, what is the point of differentiation? Now you can use Kunal's method and say delta 4 experience क्या है करके, but maybe मैं इतना smart नहीं हूँ, मुझे नहीं पता delta 4 experience क्या है, right? चल थोड़ा सा एक कुशन साथ में फ्री दे देंगे, अच्छा लगेगा लोगों को. Let's say that is a simple insight. फिर आपने बोला चलो लॉन्च करते हैं, बनाया आपने या प्रोक्योर किया आपने, लॉन्च किया. अब यार लॉन्च किया तो कैक बैठेगा कि नहीं आपको तो 15 दिन में पता लग जाएगा, राइट?
ओके,
20 दिन में पता लग जाएगा. इनफैक्ट प्रोडक्ट बिजनेस हैव बिकम सो इजी नाउ, यू डोंट इवन नीड टू हैव अ माउस. आप एक अच्छा रेंडर बना दो और लॉन्च कर दो ना. कैक बैठ रहा है तो जाके प्रोक्योर करो, नहीं बैठा तो मत प्रोक्योर करो, है ना? क्या होगा, 10 लोग ऑर्डर करेंगे, आप फोन करेंगे, बोलोगे सॉरी आउट ऑफ स्टॉक हो गया.
करेक्ट.
तो मतलब why do you need money for this? I mean B2C businesses, so it's becoming very, very clear that the only money you need is for scalable PMS, honestly. I'm sorry if I'm oversimplifying this.
No, this is interesting. At the same time, a little, बोलते हैं ना, थोड़ा alarming sound का, because this is not how I see the world behaving around me right now. So
if you see boat, if I see noise, if I see so many fabulous, profitable, those who have hit profitable scalable PMF, you take Mamaearth, you take boat, you take noise, product businesses में ले रहा हूँ, right?
Sure.
Because you're saying let's talk about B2C. They haven't. Look at their capital efficiency.
That's a fun fact, right? अभी जो बच गए वो सारे सही examples हैं, जो बाकी थे वो शायद बचे.
But वही होगा ना, होगा वही ना. See, it's not कि hindsight देख रहे हैं हम.
No, not even hindsight. It's like they've gone through a certain funnel and filtration. Whoever was not doing this got filtered out. They just died half.
So VCs are very smart at understanding this. So they will look at you and say कि they'll know their numbers देख के समझ जाएंगे ना कि आपके पास early PMF भी है कि नहीं है करके. और even before that, are your insights powerful enough, or is your ability to understand consumer psychology strong enough, or is your understanding of a GTM? Let's say दो चीज है. या तो आप GTM expert हो, like I am a bloody expert on cracking influencers in this country. मैं कुछ भी बेच दूंगा influencers के. ठीक है, अच्छा है, चलो सीड फंडिंग ले लो, है ना? बेचोगे क्या? लार्ज टैम, ठीक है, GTM है, लार्ज टैम है, ठीक है, मे बी यूल गेट सीड फंडिंग, राइट? फिर अर्ली PMF आएगा तो और पैसे मिलेंगे, वरना नहीं, राइट? और द अदर एंड की आई एम सच अ ग्रेट प्रोडक्ट गाय, लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल देयर इज दिस ब्यूटीफुल डिजाइन led company in luggage called Mokobara, right?
Sure.
I just love their products, right? I mean, they're just good at what they do. They love creating travel luggage with eye-popping designs that today's Gen Z would love to have, and that's why they got seed funded. Then they went and showed go-to-market strategy on Instagram on how they would get customers, how they would build brand. Now that's why they'll get Series A, right? So you need to have one of the two.
One of those two.
अगर दोनों है तो भाई मतलब फिर तो शायद आपको शायद डे 1 पे सीरीज ए मिल जाएगा, अगर दोनों चीज अगर आपके पास
डेमोंस्ट्रेट कर पा रहे हो तो.
हाँ. सो एंड में तो अर्ली के लिए तो वही है ना, आइदर, एंड ऑफ कोर्स यू हैव टू चूज अ लार्ज मार्केट, राइट? नाउ यू मे हैव द मोस्ट आई पॉपिंग ग्रेट प्रोडक्ट क्रेडेंशियल्स, बट इफ यू आर डूइंग समथिंग व्हिच इज theoretically also a small TAM, then maybe people will not jump in to put money. But India में अब enough पैसा है, even with small TAMs. If you have a great product insight or a great GTM, that money is available. And now there are enough, again, examples on Twitter showing all of us suck at sizing TAMs, right? TAM to entrepreneurs
Sure.
create करते हैं, right? So maybe it's a bull market case, maybe it's permanent, we don't know, but at least B2C में तो यार थोड़ा ये क्लियर हो जाता है कि one of these two things you have to crack, and by stable PMF दोनों क्रैक करनी पड़ेगी.
पर इसका तो फिर काउंटर एग्जांपल वहां पे आता, काउंटर एग्जांपल तो नहीं बोलूंगा, बट डिफरेंट वे ऑफ लुकिंग एट इट, क्योंकि इंडिया इज सच ए ह्यूज मार्केट. तो अगर माइक्रो निश ढूंढने जाओगे तो हर एक चीज में 100 करोड़ का बिजनेस हो सकता है. Even a puppy's birthday cake could be a 100 crore business in India, because there'll be 10 million puppies in India who will have birthdays in the year, right? So I'm just saying that from an ambition perspective, when somebody looks at this PMF wala kahani and the TAM wala kahani that you're talking about, there probably be perfectly healthy, profitable 100 crore businesses which would not be the best ideas to go to 1,000 crores. Or do you think that's a natural destiny for everybody to chase? Because
no, but that's why you now have that's why you have the Thrasios of the world raising so much money now, because their insight is exactly this, that there are 1,100 crore brands that will get created. Let's just buy 10 of them and create a 1,000 crore business. So I think business models will evolve.
Brand at 1,000 basically. So as a D2C founder, that's where the time question, right? Even if I have a finite time, but I have a healthy way of getting to that audience and profitably running this business, it's a perfectly okay situation.
Yeah. हाँ, बनाओ ना, कोई problem.
मतलब otherwise हर इंसान यूनिकॉर्न हंट पे चल रहा है, तो वो तो फिर वैसा हो जाएगा कि आप 0 से 1 तक चले गए, 1 से 10 तक भी चले गए, बट 10 से 100 की जर्नी में जाके आप मर गए बेसिकली.
हाँ, but I think, or you could pivot, right? I mean, I don't think, I think the hypothesis of trying to solve everything on day one, or saying yeah, this is a market where I can create unicorn, is a flawed concept according to me, right? You have to say कि I'm passionate about, again, let's go back to the first 5 minutes, right? Passion है आपका ये बनाने के लिए, आपको अच्छा लग रहा है, आप बनाओ ना. अब अगर बहुत बड़ा नहीं बनेगा तो now India has enough depth. Let's say there are companies that are doing 50 crores a year, cash flow positive. They have exit opportunities with the Thrasio guys, right? Every Indian FMCG pharma company is looking at M&A as a very solid option, right? So I mean, I think we'll have both extremes. I honestly don't think product businesses inherently have very strong scalable PMF opportunities in India now, because थोड़ा over clutter हो जाता है और moats are not very clear, right?
That's what I was going to get to.
हाँ, तो
मतलब moats की जरूरत है. हाँ, पहले complete करो चलो.
No, that's it. Like so if you look at pure D2C brands as such, the Thrasio models are interesting to create large outcomes, or you need to have an element of differentiation, let's say an exclusivity, right? Like, for example, there's this interesting business in the US called Goli, which started making gummies, and they sort of have exclusivity with suppliers. Like, they launched the world's first KSM 66 ashwagandha gummy, which is a very solid ingredient. They have global supply. The only one guy in the world makes it, the ingredient, and they have an exclusive with the guy, so nobody else can launch it. It's 100 million revenue for them globally, so it will IPO. It's profitable, right?
Sure.
So ऐसे कोई मोड से तो ठीक है.
मतलब that's a rare scenario, right? ऐसे बहुत common हर एक इंसान को नहीं मिलने वाले. A guy who's probably selling vegan ice creams cannot expect कि मेरे पास कुछ ऐसा exclusive मिल जाएगा कि मैं इसको multi-billion ले जाऊँ.
Don't just look at ingredients. The supply chain could be a mode, right? Like, for example, what Rebel did. In the end, everybody had questions that, hey, what is the inherent moat in this business? Because food is an anti-habit, right? आपको रोज कुछ अलग खाने का मन करता है. But in the end, it's a share of wallet business, and the supply chain of building 400 kitchens and making sure that 3 million orders every day are cooked to perfection across these 400 kitchens is a massive complexity,
of course,
right? Which is a solid moat to build out, right? Some people may have like erstwhile FMCG companies use distribution as a mode, right? Because they would वो pipe control करते थे ना.
Pipe control.
Like I remember when, like, for the longest time, when Shantanu at Bombay Shaving Company wanted to get his razors in different modern trade, Gillette would not
let it go. Yeah.
So, difference, I think we'll keep seeing a lot of modes, that way. Like today for marketplaces, 0% commission seems to be an interesting GTM, I would say. I don't know when it becomes a mode, but these are GTM, things. I think the best part about entrepreneurs now, Ankur, is that they'll find a way. कोई ना कोई mode निकालते रहे. So we should never say never on all these things.
हाँ, so as far as the first bunch of crores is concerned in terms of revenue scale, mode शायद जरूरी भी नहीं है, because markets are large and there's space for multiple people, and as long as you can sort out your CAC.
Stable PMF लाओ, फिर सोचो यार, मतलब मेरे हिसाब से, मतलब क्योंकि like पहले गांव बसने तो दो.
CAC कंट्रोल में चल रही है तो फिर चल रही है लाइफ basically.
but then you should see if you want to build a large business, then you should start thinking about modes.
Yeah, sure. मतलब it's a question of day zero problem versus day one problem. तो आपका 0 से 1 से 1 to 10 की जर्नी में stable
क्योंकि
PMF के
कैक
बाद
फटेगा ही ना, फिर जितना
एक point के
कंपटीशन
बाद
आएगा
फटेगा।
उतना कैक फटेगा, मतलब वो तो और इंडिया में तो वी आर ऑनेस्टली अ लिटिल ओवर सप्लाई, like one idea gets 20 companies and
फटाफट से
10 VC funded companies, right? So it's no surprise that
सीधा सीधा आपका bid
B2C
value
companies
scale up करेगा ना?
Sorry?
No, सीधा सीधा the bidding on Google for those keywords will start shooting up, and that's where CAC का सीधा math.
So it's no surprise that in the last 18 months the darling of VCP is B2B, ना, not B2C.
क्योंकि सबकी CAC shoot up कर रही है, आपस में compete कर
हो गई ना यार, मतलब see overfunding, you can say that hey overfunding हो रही है, but I mean it's up to you, right? How do you want to use that funding? And unfortunately, everything intersects at some point of time as such. I mean, Kunal doesn't have it wrong. The top 5% of India do control 60% of spends in the digital offline space, right? So share of wallet thoda sa question mein to aa hi jata hai with a large amount of capital where everyone's trying to say ki mujhse gaadi kharido but mujhse bike kharido, aur mere se grocery lo but khana mujhse mangao, but mere paas, like it's just so convoluted, right? Like that's why everyone keeps saying India mein loyalty nahi. I think it's just that we are giving them too many choices, whereas if I hear
हाँ दूसरे मार्केट से कंपेयर करके तो ऐसा ही है ना, वहाँ पे भी कौन सा बहुत होमोजेनियस मार्केट है,
साउथ ईस्ट एशिया तो नहीं है ऐसे, लाइक व्हेन आई टॉक टू फाउंडर्स देयर दे आर लाइक कि नहीं यार हमारी तो लाइफ चिल है, कि ऐसा कोई
नहीं आता
है, बट यार वहाँ पे ना मतलब मार्केट डेप्थ इज अ लिटिल बेटर, फॉर एग्जांपल जीडीपी पर कैपिटा इज बेटर, राइट? सेकंड, इतना कटथ्रोट नहीं है, सी वी हैव ऑलवेज बीन अ लिटिल कटथ्रोट कम्युनिटी,
वैसा भी नहीं है जो एक्सपैंड कर रहा है वो
क्रिकेट में इंडिया के लिए खेल रहे हैं, मतलब नथिंग एल्स, राइट? वी हैव बीन वेरी कॉम्पिटिटिव एज अ कम्युनिटी, राइट?
But so overfunding का जो exuberance of bull run जो आप बोल रहे हो, that's also to do with the fact that the market, the so-called target market, जो affluent Indians, top 5%, whatever, that's not expanding as fast as the amount of money getting deployed to acquire. So ultimately आप अगर नया customer नहीं ला रहे हो कैटेगरी के लिए या फिर इस segment के लिए, तो फिर आप आपस में compete करने वाले हो.
So what, there is one, like I don't know where the data is, but I'm hearing a lot of insights from now a lot of entrepreneurs in B2C where the depth in tier 2, tier 3 is real. Unit economics are different. You need to figure out a way to figure out your logistics, your margin structures, etc. have to be a little different. But वो depth वहाँ आ रही है. But again, it's very hard for a business to play both.
Exactly. शुरू कहाँ से करो और जा रहा कहाँ चाहते हो उसमें तो
हाँ, तो वो सब challenges करने पड़ेंगे. Like I think there are now real possibilities if businesses start saying that I'm going to only cater to Bharat and this is my market and I'll go deep here, and then your business model will
you'll want to follow the
DNA in the business will be like that.
Correct. Your DNA has to be accordingly, because you cannot build a digital marketing driven first Parle-G business, I would imagine. The kind of margin structures you have to operate on a Parle-G are very different from...
Yeah, I mean, that's why the group buying firms are doing well, right?
Sure.
वो बोल रहे हैं group buying पे even a 300 rupee order for me makes sense because I'll manage the logistics cost. Because the bigger problem was logistics there, right? There are a lot of interesting models that will come up now for Bharat, and I think that depth is real, right? I think the aspiration of Bharat is something which is very encouraging to see.
Fund the rest of the next bunch of biggies.
Already तो काफी हो गए हैं. I mean, if I look at scale, Meesho, Dealshare, a bunch of these companies that are phenomenal, we have seen phenomenal growth. All of it is because they have tapped into an unserved market. Maybe they have cracked UI, UX, or they have cracked logistics, they have cracked pricing. एंड में तो आपको एक इंसाइट चाहिए यार. एक मैं तो बोलता हूँ पावर लॉ तो यहाँ भी है. एक इंसाइट लो और उस पर खींच दो पूरा, and then that's where you build that as your biggest strength, right? Of course, at some point of time also becomes a liability if you have only that and not anything else, right? Like today, the way Meesho has scaled Bharat, it's actually, I mean, I don't think Amazon ever says that we worry about it, but they are looking and saying कि बस ये मार्केट को हमने इतना, हाँ, क्योंकि हमने बोला 300 रुपए के नीचे हम COD नहीं देंगे, right? For us, like this is, it's just hard for them to pivot a model when, and the models for Bharat are completely different from the models, and that's the big problem in B2C I see in India, right? कि इतना heterogeneous है ना. There are three Indias in terms of affordability. There are 5 Indias in terms of how communities think, right? Like a South Indian guy thinks very differently from a North Indian.
Yep.
Choices. It's all emotional. It's all about human psychology, right? And how they were nurtured in their communities, in their lives, and it's just therefore very hard to build large ubiquitous propositions that traverse everything, right?
Sure.
And again, that's why I think
that's the truth of traditional Indian businesses as well, right? I mean, pan India businesses चलाना तो वैसे historically भी बहुत सारे बहुत बड़े pan
पैराशूट
India
तेल
brands
तो
नहीं
सब जगह बेचते हैं ना
वो 1990 जो डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन पेनिट्रेशन करके और पूरी खूब सारी मार्केटिंग करके जो पहुंच गया बट वो चीज दोबारा होना बहुत मुश्किल होगा ना. So much
when distribution is
fragmentation
democratized, then तो obviously it's hard because again you have to go back and say पहले ना choice consumer के पास नहीं.
Correct. जो मिल रहा है वो ले लो और जिसका
शेल्फ में यही मिल रहा है. अगर मेरे गांव में शेल्फ में यही तेल मिल रहा है तो मैं वही लूंगा ना यार. अब तो मुझे लेकिन ऑनलाइन पे देखो ना कितने चॉइसेस
सारे ऑप्शंस हैं तो फ्रैगमेंटेशन तो लाजमी है और फिर वो भी हो जाता है ना कि हर इंसान की जो पिक्यूलियरिटीज है वो उसको अगर एंटरटेन कोई कर रहा है तो मैं सिर्फ उसी के पीछे जाऊंगा. So
we are getting pampered. The consumer is enjoying it. You're getting massively pampered.
If you just look beyond the confusion.
Yeah.
So रनवे के बारे में आप क्या सोचते हो गिवन दैट आपने 18 महीने के पहले पैसे खत्म नहीं करे तो मतलब रनवे लंबा लेके चलो टर्म्स अपने रखो जब नेगोशिएट करने के लिए आएगा इन्वेस्टर बात होगी तब देखा जाएगा. How do you
see that's the ideal thing to do, right? Like always have a runway of 24 to 36 months, but I understand that's not possible for every business to be in, right? So I think the way to think about this is make sure you have some part of your destiny in your control. Right? So whether it's 6 months, it's 12 months, it's 18 months, as much whatever makes you comfortable. Like I have known founders who prefer 5-year runways as well, and I have known founders who are like, "नहीं यार 12 महीने बहुत है." I have confidence कि whatever the market, my business will be able to raise. Right? It's more how big a risk taker you are. I think some of it also boils down to that, and I don't think I'm not a risk taker. It's just that maybe it's a little age. When I see 24-year-olds today, we're like कि ठीक है यार मतलब 12 महीने बहुत है देखा जाएगा.
हाँ बट ये सब लोगों ने बुल रन ही देखे इन्होंने बेयर रन देखा नहीं ना कभी प्रैक्टिकली स्पीकिंग.
यार बेयर रन भी देखा है तो एक्चुअली इफ यू थिंक अबाउट इट फ्रॉम अ 24-year-old point of view अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट इज आल्सो ये ना ही इज सेइंग बॉस आई वांट टू गिव $10 billion आउटकम या मेरे को मैं छोड़ दूंगा तो चलेगा. राइट? इट्स अ वैलिड वे. आई एम थिंकिंग 38 पे यार दिस इज द आई वांट टू क्रिएट अ लेगेसी और थोड़ा सोच एज आई सेड इट्स ऑल अगेन पैशन एंड पर्सनल ये राइट. It's not that we don't take risks, but it's just that we don't take undue risks. And therefore, some of it is that, right? So we prefer a 24-30 month at all points of time. And luckily, markets have been good. Now, obviously, if we hit a bear market that everybody's signaling for this year, maybe over the next 18 months, after 18 months, we'll be at a 12-month runway. But that's okay, right? At least we'll have grown into some size that we'll have confidence he will be able to raise, right? See, because whatever the state of markets, if your business is decent, you will always get money.
Which is exactly the point, right?
Situation में पहुंच गया है कि आपका business अच्छा होगा तो पैसा मिल जाए.
Which is exactly the point कि भाई अभी बुल रन चल रहा है मतलब ये नहीं कि business को irrational तरह से बनाओ, business को sensibly बनाओ तो winter आ भी जाएगी तो फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा, life will go on.
हाँ वो जरूरी है. But some calculated risk can be taken
as such. मतलब so not even saying कि तुम risk लेना बंद कर दो और FD में पैसा डाल दो, right? Obviously that's the point of entrepreneurship that you will go for let's say inorganic and larger outcomes. But how do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line in rationality versus aggression? And which risks are calculated versus uncalculated is where the fun part comes in. क्योंकि जितने लोग CACs देखते हैं अभी among the D2C founders and startups that we see, I'm not sure enough people are looking at the framework that you spoke about. अगर देख रहे हो तो mortality नहीं आती शायद, right? Because with a seed money of 3 crores, you have some money to figure things out कि चल मैं इसको सीरीज तक ले जाऊंगा, कुछ तो प्रोडक्ट बन ही जाएगा जो मार्केट में पहुंच रहा है. But there's a 70-80% mortality there. क्योंकि क्या होता है वो 5-6 लाख 7 लाख 10 लाख महीने का Google Ads पे शुरू कर दिया without tracking the funnels, without tracking the repeats. साल भर बाद पैसा खत्म हो गया. And then you don't have the growth of the product to demonstrate कि भाई अब मुझे next round of funding मिले. And that's the part which we worry about, or rather we get concerned about कि यार product ठीक था तुम अगर ढंग से खेलते तो हो जाता.
Yeah, I think that's where players like you have to really maybe apart from obviously make money from D2C direct to consumer or e-commerce businesses. Figure out evangelizing, teaching this. Like, can you give playbooks I think would be very, very, very
What do you
interesting.
think
Right?
we're
If you
doing
can,
here right now with you? कि भाई ये
हाँ,
सब
but यार
पहले तो पहले ना
ये ना
वाई पार्ट समझना जरूरी है. लोगों को पहले मोटिवेशन तो समझे कि भैया ये मुझे सोचना पड़ेगा. There is no way out of it because people who at 24 have raised $5 million are probably not in the best mood of listening कि भाई मुझे कोई ज्ञान देगा.
I think, देखो, I think that's what I am also learning, by the way, Ankur.
हाँ.
I think I've done that mistake in the first 18 months, right?
Hmm.
So I have a lot of very smart young 24-year-olds.
Sure.
I did the mistake of giving them ज्ञान.
Okay.
ज्ञान सुन लेते, हाँ हाँ बढ़िया ज्ञान है करके.
Hmm.
But end में यार वो करते वो है जो उन्होंने ठाना है करके,
ठीक
right?
है.
Now I am learning कि okay, I am going to enable you with the information and ask the right questions that you yourself come up with the answer कि मुझे ये करना है.
Fair
Otherwise, boss, we also all have to learn. I'm telling you honestly, we're
Gen Z से
dinosaurs
डील कैसे
already
करना
at our age.
है?
ठीक है? अरे नहीं यार, मतलब like we can keep complaining कि बहुत generational gap आ गया, लोग समझते नहीं है, हम तो इतना hard work करते थे. But I mean, look, we have a company to run, figure it out, यार. मतलब, so I am realizing that unless I inspire them and motivate them for themselves to come up and say, this is the answer that I want to work on, great, right? I need to have the ability to, if I have a strong view, that this is the right answer, help them come to that answer on their own. And it's going to take a little while for me also to learn that because I've never done that before. But करना पड़ेगा यार in the end.
So I think that's where the ecosystem play comes in, right? So
नहीं यार, but Ankur, I'll tell you a little different thing, right? Like when I say
employees से ज़्यादा मैं तो ecosystem की बात कर रहा हूँ. So obviously team
हाँ,
management
but
versus
as a
ecosystem.
playbook, for example, no one's given a playbook की देख ठीक है, the ज्ञान is good, right? But and I think you guys do it in the form of case studies, right? कि ये 3 चीज करी तो इतना retention बढ़ा, ये 3 चीज करी तो इससे थोड़ा conversion funnel बढ़ा, and so on and so forth. Again, those are good, but is there a way for companies, and I think that could be an opportunity again of point of differentiation, which is skin in the game sort of marketing, right? Ki yaar, let's figure out a way to increase your funnel. Like, I mean, the easiest thing that I see a lot of good SaaS companies doing is ki yaar, percentage of impact would be our fees, right? And sort of go a little deeper. I don't know. I may be giving you wrong ideas and Avlesh will say, boss, किसको ले आया तो कुछ भी बोल रहा है
internally. So we've argued this internally. वो obviously ultimately जब dollar value आएगी, people will love कि भाई तो बहुत पैसे ले रहे हो.
I don't know, yaar. I think today's again. I think that used to be our. जब हम, I know you are also, I think, my age or a little older, right? Like, I think today's 24-year-old is very happy because he's read NN Taleb. This is how the world should behave, right? Skin in the game सीखा है मैंने तो. I'm telling you, it's actually better. I actually think if you know and understand them, you would be able to actually do a lot more with them. I think they are far more collaborative than, like, we always were in a, like, we were always a low trust nation. We still are. But today's 24-year-old is not like that. He's far more optimistic, far more collaborative, far more trusting. But he wants to see कि यार, can you meet me midway types, and not in negotiation terms. कि यार, वो जो मैं give and take की बोल रहा था starting में, कि partner से ज़्यादा is there something that you could help me do, because थोड़ा सा ना ये भी लोग सब सीख रहे कि यार time value of money है, मैं सब कुछ थोड़ी करूँगा. Can I get someone to help me do that? Could be an interesting experiment to run with a few young companies. Maybe take young companies, right? And see.
But sure, fair point taken. मतलब skin in the game वाला आता है तो भाई करते रहो. So we run a starter program for the fact that these people need a lot more handholding than they currently have resources for, because it's not easy to build a team for retention either. So dashboards देखना और उन सबको action करना is some amount of work. So anyway, that will keep happening, yeah. And I've been nudged by सिद्धार्थ कि तुम बातें किए जा रहे हो, तुम्हारा 90 मिनट हो गया है. But अगर ये online live होता तो शायद हम आधे घंटे पहले खत्म करना पड़ता. But interesting, the fact that this is free flowing and going on. So let me just make sure that whatever I had structured to be covered कि हाँ ये पूछना है तो पूछना चाहिए. तो अभी CSE CLV clearly is on your radar. I don't think that's there's no two ways about it. CAC or CLV is like,
it's not about. We call it lifetime value, LTV by CAC, and for us, it's not only on the entire proposition. I have to do it for every channel, for every particular category. Within category, in fact, I am now nudging folks to look at every product as well, right? Like every product line को तुम देखो और बोलो इसका ये है कि नहीं. थोड़ा सा rigor हो जाता है, but I think, see, this anyway takes time to build as a DNA. So we've just started a little early on that.
So what's the team
sometimes
that's doing this for you? Please complete your.
So this is a DNA that the entire, let's say, the channel marketing team and the category marketing team, both of them would have.
Okay.
But what this does is this scares you from innovation sometimes, because you're so anal about looking at this. So separate innovation team, जिसको बोला है तू LTV
ये
छोड़,
समझ देगी.
तू सिर्फ
नहीं बोले.
CAC, what is a proposition that will आग लग जाएगी मार्केट में, तू वो सोच. साइड में देन there's another innovation team इसलिए कि यार तुम ऐसे प्रोडक्ट सोचो जिसमें बहुत लंबा LTV होगा, and those have to be separate, because see, in the end our minds are very weird, right? If you have the same person thinking long term, short term pain होगा but long term gain होगा, and short term में possible ही नहीं है करना, right? So, and that is the investment that for example we do when we raise capital, because now you can afford to do these experiments. Now you can afford to have a team who's innovating on the side and not worried about LTV CAC, and just saying कि एक variable solve करना है मुझे, and 6 months later also if there is no outcome, it's okay, right? Doesn't matter. But they need that cocoon, otherwise this part of the business now वो daily grind रहता है, उसमें innovation नहीं हो पाता है. So these are all design level questions that founders need to then start investing in, because otherwise it's too linear as a business again. Exactly. There is a non-linearity in the business.
तो इसमें एक पार्ट आपने बताया था कि आप कैक को तो 15 दिन में पता चल जाएगा सही है कि नहीं है. अब कुछ लोग बोलेंगे भाई मेरा ब्रांड भी बिजनेस होता है, ब्रांड बनाने के लिए खर्चा करना पड़ता है इनिशियली, एंड दैट्स वेयर माय मोट पोटेंशियली माइट कम फ्रॉम. कैक को डिस्ट्रॉय कर देगा अगर आप टॉप ऑफ द फनल मिड फनल काम करने लगोगे तो.
I'm not a strong believer in brand spends as building brand. Your brand has to made, what is a brand? It's an emotional association. No, why do you need to spend for emotional association? Like for example, I remember when we called the men's health platform Man Matters.
टॉप और मिडिल ऑफ द फनल कैसे करते हो फिर?
अभी तक तो ज्यादा नहीं करते हम, अभी करेंगे, but again the business has to show stable PMF for you to invest in brand. Without stable PMF, I would not invest.
तो बोल रहे हो पहले बॉटम ऑफ द फनल काम करके एक लेवल तक पहुंचो, उसके बाद टॉप और मिड सोचना. अगर बॉटम में कुछ है नहीं तो फिर धंधा क्यों कर रहे हो? Okay, fair enough.
And
so well that comes
I don't think all brand recall is about spend. No, it's about how strong your proposition is, how close you are to the consumer, and
sure.
So I think brand spend should only.
भाई बॉट फनल के नीचे कोई है तो उसको पकड़ लो पहले, और वहां नहीं है तो फिर करी क्यों वाला सवाल रहेगा.
Correct. Well, if your business is hoping that you will create top of funnel and then bottom of funnel, तो फिर तो, I mean, that's a tough. I mean, I'm sure there are a couple of.
बैंक में at least.
हाँ, बहुत पैसे चाहिए बैंक में to do that thesis.
Fair enough. So category creation at that level, which is like a futuristic play, might just not be the right thing to do for startups.
See, everyone, I mean, if I look again, boat is a prime example. Right? Bottom of funnel अच्छे से खींचा.
Need तो बहुत clear था ना उसका, bottom तो सही था उसका एकदम.
ऐसे बहुत needs है वैसे, कम needs नहीं है जहाँ bottom of funnel में आप नहीं खींच सकते.
I'm sure, I'm not even disputing that. नहीं यार, but जो खर्चा करते हैं पहले 10 लाख रुपए महीने से शुरू कर दोगे तो obviously you're not dealing proper sharply with the bottom of the funnel. You're wasting a bunch of money at a bunch of places. But ठीक है, that's the learning people will have to go through as long as they learn before they run out of money. Awesome. तो मतलब any 3 mistakes that you think people make जिसको आपको alert करना चाहते हैं? यार ये सीड से सीरीज स्टेज पे ये 3 चीजें मत करना.
Don't hire the wrong people. If you have got any discomfort that a person is not going to work out long term, just make sure you take the call immediately, right? I think any series, forget seed, series A, series B. I think any series you should just make sure that happens. I mean, we've always followed that. I learned that in Rebel. I know again there's enough gyan about this, but I don't think people still they look at skill sets. We've still not looked at skill sets. For us, for me personally, high ownership and ability to like कुछ बड़ा बनाना है, that hunger is far more important than anything else. Early stage पे तो you have to optimize for that, right? Because unless you get that, see, why do I have a passionate bunch of people who question me also, right? Because they are equally, they think themselves, they care, right? They are hungry to create success. They don't want to make mistakes, and they have high enough ownership to even question me, right? So super critical that you build out a team like that. And third, never ever be in a cocoon where you're stuck. How do I ask for help? Even as founders or CMOs, be absolutely unabashed. Like कोई शर्म नहीं है saying that मुझे नहीं पता है, help चाहिए करके, right? I think these are the three things that have helped me learn in the last 18-24 months. And even though these seem principles that you should follow, I think what ends up happening is there's just so much happening that you miss some of these obvious points. So just maybe writing those down and keeping them ki roz tum dekho ki yaar, am I conflicting with this or not, is something that you need to do that, right?
It's been a fabulous conversation, Revant. I think personally for me, it's a bunch of interesting things that I would pick up. Also summarize them for such because this is a recording session. So
Sure.
Good. Thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. Nice talking to you, Ankur. Pleasure.
Absolutely
Bye.
same.